Here we are, 2023, and it seems to be gaining huge amounts of traction all over the place. I think they're kind of allowing that to happen because if they wanted to, they could have crushed us before it even started, and they didn't. They let this thing out, and I think they figured out a way to sort of introduce it into the population and maybe distract them with a couple other things that I don't know. I understood why they did it though in 1960, and I agreed with it. I did.
So Mark, you just it was going to be one of my questions later on anyway, but as you sort of mentioned it, you mentioned there about Roswell aliens. I was just going to ask you a question now. So there's obviously a lot of stuff online that leads this into a reason behind the Antarctic and why we're told it's a globe is sort of a different species leading us. What's your version on that, please?
I believe, are there other species influencing us? Yeah. All the time. Why wouldn't they? In fact, when we leave and the next group comes in, we're probably going to be influencing them as well. But at the same time, do I think they're all nefarious? No, but I think there's rules. So by that I mean our unbroken history only goes back 5,000 years, give or take. And I think that every civilization, because we're not the first group, obviously, to rent this apartment by any stretch. I mean, come on, the real pyramids, the sunken cities off of Japan, sunken cities off of India, Pumapunku, Machu Picchu, other names that I can't even pronounce. There's all sorts of remnants of civilizations that are out there. But what I think happens is that every civilization, kind of like a class, in school. Once you reach a certain point, you graduate one way or the other, and then you move on. Do I think these other civilizations are part of Mars and Jupiter and Venus? No. Why would you? I think they're just older versions of us more than anything, in different states of technology. But that being said, I think there are rules. You want to look up one of the most fascinating alien human encounters, and by I mean human, I mean they were in the vicinity, would be it'd be the 1561 Nuremberg event. And there's a wiki entry on that 1561 Nuremberg event. And what happened was in 1561, over Nuremberg, Germany, two giant space armadas, beautiful April day, no clouds in the sky, just started hammering on each other over the city for a full hour, right? And now, granted, there were no cameras back in 1561, but there were lots of sketch artists, and they sketched the whole damn thing. Like, what is happening? But remember, there's no science fiction, so they had no frame of reference. And then a third faction shows up. One single giant black angular ship pulls in between them. And then the other two groups are like, okay, we got to get out of here. They take off. The black ship hangs out for a little while and then takes off on its own. That raises so many questions that about a power hierarchy, which would be like, okay, one, who are the first two groups that showed up? Second would be, who's that black ship that showed up, and why were the first two groups scared of them? Were these guys like gang members? Were these guys the cops? Were they the UN? What the hell, right? But the big one would be, for me, was like, what's the sort of response time? Why did it take them an hour to get there? I think these two groups found a dead zone in the coverage, and they're like, yeah, no one's watching this for the next hour. Let's do this. I mean, who knows? It could have been rival skater gangs for all we know. But I mean, come on, I could take a gun, fire it out this window, and I guarantee you, within 10 minutes, there's going to be cops at this door, right? Yeah. And you're telling me there was a full blown, flying aircraft carriers that were just hammering on each other for an hour, and they finally, decided to show up. So I think there are rules, kind of like if you're a Star Trek fan, like the Prime Directive. You want to pick off some sailors in a boat every once in a while, or some campers, or somebody that's off in the freaking weeds, not paying attention. That's fine. That's within the rules. You cannot land in the middle of freaking London, a giant golden spaceship, and start taking selfies. You can't do it. I think there are defined rules, and there are penalties for that, which is why, because that's one of the arguments is why hasn't a ship landed in the middle of wherever and started doing stuff? It's like, well, because it would influence things forever. I think the point of this is to have everyone, one of the points is to have everyone acting naturally. And they can't, Prime Directive, you can't have them acting naturally if they've got really weird questions that'll be burning their heads forever and ever. So that's why, again, everyone keeps off at a distance. They're way out of camera range most of the time. Come on, video footage, we hardly ever see it. Ever, and there's 6 billion smartphones in the world right now, and we still can't get any good UFO footage. Yeah. And while we're at it, 6 billion smartphones, and there's not a single video of a meteor going from sky to ground. 6 billion, not even in the water. So well done, whoever designed this place. Well done.
While you've hit on that, I'll tell you something that I saw today. So there was on a Facebook group. It was talking about big craters, and they're everywhere. They're meant to be hit by meteors. But like you say, if a massive meteor's come down, surely there'd be debris everywhere, bits of rock, bits of, and there's never any found.
Oh, hell, I'll do you one better. Look at the moon sometime. By the way, the moon is a huge mystery. One, of course, that we only see the exact same side of the moon at any given point. It doesn't even rotate a quarter of a degree in 100 years, right? Even though it'll turn this way, it'll turn into like a clock face, but you'll never see the other side of it. But the other part that people don't get is that all the moon craters on the moon are at 45-degree angles, meaning they're hitting 45-degree, 90 degree angles, where they're hitting straight on into the moon, right? Well, statistically speaking, that's impossible. All the meteors can't hit the moon to where they make perfect circular craters. There should be divots all over the place and weird. It's almost like the moon was decorated with craters. Like somebody drew it that way. Like, they kind of like what we do with craters here. We've got some craters here, sure, right? But they almost look ornamental. But especially the big one we have, I think it's out in Arizona out here. Oh yeah, big, perfectly circular crater. Thing must have come straight down. Okay, then that's fine. But why are all the moon craters like that? It's like somebody got. I'm not picking. I'm not saying you guys got lazy or something, but it does happen.
While we're still to the meteor thing,
yeah.
So, has there ever been? Obviously, there is people that have said this is a meteor. They found this and that. What's your theory on that? Do you think that's a fake rock, or what is your theory on that?
No, I do think that there are some debris sometimes that will get here. Now, are they placed here, without people looking? It's like, okay, no one's over there. Let's set up something, right? And put some fragments. I don't know exactly. But as far as creating meteors in the sky, do I think they're all visual? They're all just holograms? No, somebody asked me that 8 years ago, and a friend of mine came up with an idea. It's like, well, if this is a physical place, all you have to do is set up some sort of railgun system up there with some metallic ore, fire it in at a low trajectory, let the friction, burn it up, and hopefully, make sure you don't aim at any major cities, right? Which is why that one in Russia that was that 10 years ago now? There was one in Russia that I think it was like 10 years ago where it exploded over a city. And that was pretty spectacular. It's like, I think somebody fell asleep at the wheel at that one. And he's like, dude, are you watching that? That is way too close. It's like, blow it up.
As I said, as we first started, I'd done an interview with a psychic medium.
Yeah.
And she was telling us how she thought it was created and how we got it, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And she went on a little bit of a flat Earth. So she said, I just wanted to ask your opinion on this.
Sure.
So she said, our Earth, our flat Earth, is there, and she said the ice wall is so we can't get off of that.
Right.
But she says there is other planets, but they're not up there in the sky. They're on another flat Earths around us, but we
Sure.
can't get to them because of the ice wall. What would be your theory on that? Have you heard that sort of
Oh
thing?
yeah. I mean, if you're gonna come on, man, you know the answer to that, and that is if you're gonna build one of these, why don't you build a whole bunch? Because it's way more entertaining. I mean, if you're gonna build one, in fact, just stack them around each other. Why not? And the bigger question there is, if there are, and make them in various states of technology and culture and all this stuff, because again, why wouldn't you if you have the ability to do it, if it's easy enough to do? The bigger question there is, are the older civil, do some groups get to fly to travel between them, or are they exactly like this? I mean, are they sealed off to where whoever's in here, now you're staying in here, everybody else, and maybe you're subterranean, because you could build a pretty healthy civilization. It wouldn't take much room if you want to do subterranean. I kind of go with whoever's in here is with us, because I don't know if cross-contamination would be the smart thing to do. I mean, let's put it this way. Art imitates life and life imitates life. And when we do lab scenarios, because remember in labs, when we do all those dishes, we do, Petri dishes, and I don't want to necessarily boil us down to a Petri dish, but the similarities are there. You make sure that there is no cross-contamination for various reasons, because one, it's too hard to track. And if something goes wrong, it's like, okay, who mixed with who? What? Why were they over there? And it gets messy. Plus, remember, prime directive. You don't want, if the rules are the same for every group, then don't mess with that formula. Don't make it more complicated than it is. You don't need to do it. I personally don't think people. Now, are there higher civilizations that can go between? Probably. Do we see them? I don't know. Maybe. I consider them the caretakers, the superintendents. I don't know what you call them over there. The overseers. Little G's. Let's put it that way. If God is capital G, I firmly believe there are lesser deities that have influence over certain things. Because why make a random versions of these? Why not make it even better by making random versions of deities that act as subcontractors for less of, I don't want to diminish God, but you know what I mean.
Another question that the psychic medium brought up when I spoke to her that weekend.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, you're right where she was talking about Colorado. Is that correct?
The what? Yeah. Oh,
So
I was in Colorado. I was there for 20 years, but now I'm back up in Seattle.
So she was saying up in the mountains, there's a lot of activities go on up there, sort of in the caves, and she believes from a psychic medium side that there's portals in these mountains that lead through from one of these flat earths to the next. Have you ever heard anything of that type of thing before?
Connecting one flat earth to the next, yeah, maybe. But if that was the key, I don't hate it. It would be a nice idea if you had people that were dealing with the infrastructure, if like mechanical. So if there were maintenance access points, so that if everything was connected, possibly, sure, why not? But to her point of there's a lot of activity. Yeah, I saw it, and what made me, and this was way before, this was several years before I got into flat earth, there was a series of forest fires in Colorado, big ones, where houses were being burned, like neighborhoods were burned. No one was dying, but it was a lot of property damage. Wind was kicking in. And I remember being in a park watching it from the hills, from the foothills. And it was pushing dusk. Right, the sun had already gone down, and I was seeing craft. I was there with binoculars and night vision, and I was seeing craft that were hovering over various parts. These weren't helicopters. These were not forest fire planes. These were craft hovering over the forest fires. almost like they were watching, like it was they were just viewing the whole thing. I was like, yeah, you know what, that does make sense, because everything, there's routine things, and then there's things that are more interesting. And it's like watching a forest fire clear out, part of this would be kind of interesting to watch. It kind of reminded me of, I think they're allowed to, tour things, and because everyone was distracted with the forest fire, they're not gonna bother these guys. Kind of, you heard the term Foo Fighters?
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell? Yeah. The lights, the little lights that were flying behind both Allied and Axis planes, right? They were flying behind. Why? Because war is a heck of a production. I mean, we make movies of war all the time. What, again, interesting that both sides thought they were the enemy. Hey, both sides, they'd shoot at him. They couldn't hit him. They're like, stop shooting at him. You're wasting bullets. But both sides, we thought they were the Germans. The Germans thought they were ours. And it's like, no, it's the older class, just kind of viewing stuff. It's like, hey, what? There's a bomber run happening. Oh yeah, let's follow those guys.
Anyone that's still not made their mind up but still watching, what are the top things you can tell them to sort of look into to make their mind up for themselves?
Okay,
guidelines.
I'll give you the 5 bullet points that I gave a physicist from Georgetown years ago, which was first thing you should look at. First thing that everybody looks at is long distance photography, which is the curvature set by science should be this. We can see further than this all the time in just about every scenario you can think of in the world. The second one would be gravity versus the vacuum of space. Look into it yourself, which is the gravity it is not a cure-all. The gravity is not a barrier. If it is the vacuum of space, we shouldn't be here. There should be the only reason we are breathing here is because there's a barrier between us and whatever's outside this world. Now, is there a vacuum outside this world? I don't know. Maybe. Third one would be the eclipse shadow, which is the eclipse shadow is too small for what we're looking at. So if the moon is 2,000 miles wide, I'm not going to convert it to kilometers for you. If it's 2,000 miles wide, we'll say 3,500 kilometers. Why is the blackout zone, the eclipse shadow, why is it only, we'll say 90 kilometers wide? Why? It's because that's what we say the moon is in terms of size. We say, oh, that's a coincidence that the eclipse shadow is about the same size as what we say the moon is. It's not this massive ball up there. And I've seen the eclipse shadow for myself. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. But then you look at the shadow on the ground, you look at the map, it's like, wait a minute, why is this thing so freaking tiny? It's absolutely tiny. Fourth one is the moon temperature. Look into that yourself. You can go out and buy a $20 point and click thermometer. They sell these everywhere, and it's usually used to test engine blocks and asphalt and pavement. If it's 90, I got to do Fahrenheit for you. If it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit in the sun, it's 70 degrees in the shade, right? It's always cooler in the shade, but not in the moonlight. In the moonlight, it's actually the opposite. It's warmer in the moon shade than the moonlight. In fact, up to 13 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a couple degrees Celsius. And it's like, what does that mean? It's like, well, that shouldn't be, meaning the moon is generating a cold laser light that you can measure. Not only that, but if you take a magnifying glass to moonlight, it even gets colder. So most scientists have never even heard this. Now, does that mean that the Earth is flat? No, but it completely destroys the relationship between the sun and the moon. Meaning, the moon's only lit because it's reflecting the sun's light. That's what we're told since we were kids. No, the moon's self-illuminated and it's generating a cold laser light. The question is, why is it generating a cold laser light? And again, you can go on Amazon and cold laser light. We've been able to do this for years and years. They now sell little health and beauty products, cold laser light, anti-aging crap. But it's interesting that the moon would be this. So basically, the sun is just a giant incandescent light bulb, and the moon is just this little LED laser light, which I think is fascinating. Last but not least, the last question I gave them was the Van Allen belts. Look into that. The Van Allen belts, are they deadly? Yes or no? Simple question. The Van Allen belts announced by NASA's Van Allen back in the late 50s, late 1959, where he said that, yeah, there's super huge belts of radiation around the whole globe. No one should go through them ever, 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 ever. And then the very next year, they announced the space program. It's like, oh, we're going through the belts. It's like, wait, how are you going through them? You already said you can't go through them. It's like, oh, we're going to go real, real fast. It's like, okay, what are you going to use for shielding? Because the only thing to shield you from radiation are lead, which we know about, gold, which is twice as dense as lead, and then a whole bunch of water, which we use in power plants. And the Americans didn't use any of that crap. They used aluminum and plastic to go around the moon and back and spend a lot of time in those belts. And nobody got radiation poisoning. Nobody died. Nobody even got cancer. There's still 4 of these guys walking around today. So so then you're going to come back and say, well, they're not deadly. Obviously, they made a mistake. It's like, oh, no, that's not true. You can go to NASA's website. There's a wonderful video out there called Orion Trial by Fire. Orion is the American Mars program. Mars. And where they said, we're not going to test our manned capsules if we can solve the radiation problem. It's like, what are you talking about? You solved it back in the 1960s. You never even had a problem with it. What are you talking? This is not even a thing. And again, the general public, they forget things. The general public, I get it. They have the attention span of goldfish, and they don't understand. So what I throw out to people, if you want closing remarks, which is, don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Ask questions. Figure this out for yourself. I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to persuade you. I'm just here to put the idea in your head. You are the one. Everybody that goes into flat Earth hates it first. Everybody's like, flat Earth, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And then they all convert themselves, which is why we have a 99% retention rate. Everyone that gets in, you can't get out. So be careful if you're going to look into this, because once you look at it, you can't unsee it. It's kind of like the Matrix.
Just one last question for me.
Yeah.
What's your personal opinion of Elon Musk and trying to send rockets to Mars?
I could spend an entire day on Elon Musk, but I won't. I will give you a short little rant, but I'm glad because this way I can get it off my chest. I hate Elon Musk. Not because of him as a person, because of what the media has tried to turn him into. They have tried to create Elon Musk. They've tried to turn him into a real-life Tony Stark from Iron Man. And to the point where he was even in Iron Man 2. He had a bit part where he was, they actually met each other in a restaurant briefly in Iron Man 2. He is there. The New York Post ran an article years ago, and thank God they ran it, because I was thinking the exact same thing. He was on my radar because in 2017, he said, oh, well, I'm going to send 2 tourists around the moon in 2018. And it was like, what are you talking about? That's the most aggressive space timeline I've ever heard. You don't have a rocket. You don't have a crew. You don't have a craft. You have nothing. Why would you even say this, right? And of course, it never happened. And then the more I looked into him, he just makes these claims. If you are a publicly endorsed billionaire in America, remember, he's not even an American. He's South African, for God's sakes. You can say whatever you say, you are you headlines instantly. Doesn't matter. And because people forget what you said, they don't follow up. So he said, oh, I'm going to build a super plane that's going to go from the US to China in 2 hours, and it's going to cost nothing to do. No. I'm going to make an underground bullet train from Los Angeles to San Francisco. No. I'm going to save those kids in that cave with my super little submarine. No. I'm going to solve Puerto Rico's power problems after the hurricane. No. Everything he said, he claimed that he wanted to do, he never did. So when he put the Tesla into space, right, I just about lost my mind, because it's like I thought it was a joke when somebody sent it to me. I go, okay, who photoshopped this? Like, no, man, that's a live link. I'm going, what? That's not even possible. That car should be on fire. Right, the dash should have melted, the windows should have spider webbed, the tires should have exploded. In fact, every pressurized system should have exploded, and it didn't. And not only that, but what got me? You know how I knew they were so nervous about doing that little thing is because there were no logos anywhere. This is America. We brand everything. This is SpaceX and Tesla. There should have been giant logos covering that entire car. Even the mannequin should have been covered in logos. In fact, why wasn't the S-Class? Why wasn't the four-door sedan? Why didn't he use the flagship? That's what you're selling. You're not selling the stupid convertible. Nobody drives the convertible. They all drive the freaking S-Class, right? In fact, with the S-Class, you could get 4 people. You could have had Disney sponsor the entire thing. You could have had a Stormtrooper in the front seat and Iron Man and Groot and Boba Fett in the back. It would have been absolutely awesome. Anyway, the thing would have paid for itself. And yet they never did. It was some of the greatest theater I've ever seen. There was so much. I could go into so much, but no. Elon is an absolute puppet for the United States government. They funnel tons of money through him. In fact, the biggest example should be the fact that SpaceX is allowed to launch off of NASA's facilities. It's like they're direct competition. Why is the U.S. government allowing SpaceX, a private company, to use their sites? It's because they are
actually on NASA's site. So basically, he's part of NASA, really.
He is part of NASA. It's all NASA engineers. It's all NASA. It is all freaking theater. And people still to this day come up to me and they say, Elon Musk is the most brilliant man in the world. It's like, why would you say that? It's like my uncle, for example, he was absolutely convinced that Elon started Tesla. It's like, no, Tesla had been out there for years. He just bought Tesla. Thank God. At one point they were saying, oh yeah, Elon founded PayPal. It's like, no, he didn't. He didn't. He was, he didn't. In fact, now that Twitter's gone, you wait. In a couple years, you'll be able to ask kids on the street. I guarantee it. And they'll say, who started Twitter, which is now X, right? And they'll say, oh, it was Elon. It's like, no, Twitter had been around for years. Yeah. Absolutely freaking years. The only reason he bought it, which means the government bought it, right, is because he was forced to. He was, he makes these comments like, oh, I think $54 a share is a fair price for that. I'd buy it. And they sued him. And they're like, yeah, sorry, that's a verbal agreement. You have to buy it for that much. And his lawyers came back and said, yeah, dude, it'd actually be cheaper if you just freaking bought it because we're going to spend millions in legal fees. And you're not going to get anything. So he bought it and then he gutted it. And now it's gone. Now it's just basically just this hollow shell called X. By the way, that's really original. SpaceX and then X. Oh yeah, super great. No, I'm disappointed more than anything that he is allowed to be this Swiss Army knife for media. Whatever they tell him to do, he does. He comments on all sorts of crap that he shouldn't, and he just, I'm just disappointed that that's the best they could come up with. They couldn't even use an American. You had to grab this guy. Nobody else. You couldn't use anybody. It was him.
All right, Mark. Thanks ever so much for coming on. Where can people find you if they're interested in everything you do, what they've liked today? Where can they find you and find your stuff?
The easiest thing to find me, I don't generally promote myself too much. I just go onto any search engine and type in Flat Earth Mark. You'll find me. You will find the rabbit holes that lead to me. If you want to endorse anything, endorse the app that one of our channels made. It's called the Flat Earth, Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app by Blue Water Bay. It is absolutely wonderful. It's a real-time thing with Q&A. So real time. That's what's happening on the Flat Earth, the sun and the moon on it. It's a Q&A thing. It's awesome. I love it. So there you go.
Marvelous. Mark, it's been really appreciated, and I've learned so much listening to you today. A lot of research I'm going to be doing now after this chat. So thank you ever so much for coming on. Really
thank you. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Oh yeah, and by the way, long live Flat Earth.